Again, I want to thank our folks for filling in. Brother Steve is away this week. And so grateful for a lot of musical talent in our church. They can step right in and cover for Brother Steve. Amen? That was really sad. I didn't have to look up. We really have a lot of musical talent in our church. Amen? Amen. All right. I'll get you warmed up for the sermon now. Get you thanking our music folks. Now, did I not tell you a couple of weeks ago, the book of Judges has some strange stories. Didn't I tell you? Good, shake your head like this. I told you that. And you said, you remember what the prevailing mood was? You said, bring them on. Okay. Today is one of those strange stories. Take your Bibles, turn to the book of Judges, chapter 3. I mean, we've seen a couple of odd ones, but it's getting odd. Is that a word? Judges, chapter 3, and we're going to begin reading in verse 12. In verse 12. Judges chapter 3, begin reading in verse 12. I'm reading from the New American Standard Version of the Bible, and you follow along with whatever translation you have with you. And I will tell you that today especially, you may see some interesting words in whatever translation of God's Word that you're using. Judges chapter 3, verse 12. Now the sons of Israel, look at this next word, again did evil in the sight of the Lord. This is a pattern in the book of Judges. So the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And he, that is Eglon, gathered to himself the sons of Ammon and Amalek, both of those perennial bad guys in the Old Testament. So not only has Eglon brought Moab to bear against Israel, but he's called all, Hank Williams would say, of his rowdy friends to join in. And he went and defeated Israel, and they possessed the city of the palm trees. That's a way of saying that they made their capital at Jericho. And the sons of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. But when the sons of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. And the sons of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. And Ehud made himself a sword which had two edges, a cubit in length, roughly 18 inches. And he bound it on his right thigh under his cloak. And he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. And then we're given this little fact. Now Eglon was a very fat man. And it came about when he had finished presenting the tribute, the taxes, that he sent away the people who had carried in the tribute. But he himself turned back from the idols which were at Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he said, keep silence. And all who attended Eglon were sent out. They left him. And Ehud came to him while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And Ehud arose from his seat. Even kings of Moab stand up when they are getting a message from God. It wasn't the message he expected. Verse 21 says, Ehud Ehud stretched out his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the handle also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, and he did not draw the sword out of his belly, and the refuse came out. Then Ehud went out into the vestibule and shut the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. And when he had gone out, his servants came and looked, and behold, the doors of the roof chamber were locked, and they said, "He is relieving himself in the cool room." And they waited until they became anxious, and behold, he did not open the doors of the roof chamber. Therefore they finally took the key and opened them, and behold, their master had fallen to the floor dead. And Ehud escaped while they were delaying, and he passed by the idols and escaped into Seirah. And it came about when he arrived that he blew the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the sons of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was in front of them. And he said to them, "Pursue them, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands." So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan opposite Moab, and did not allow anyone to cross. In other words, they encircled them, surrounded them. Verse 29 says, they struck down at that time about 10,000 Moabites, all robust and valiant men, and no one escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land was undisturbed for 80 years. We didn't read all of the stories in this chapter, but there are 3 stories in Judges chapter 3. There are 3 judges named and their exploits described in this chapter. 2 of the stories give us very little detail, but this 3rd story in the chapter, the one in the middle, qualifies for the TMI award. Too much information. Amen? But remember what you said. I told you there were some bizarre stories in this book, and you said, bring them on. Well, now we've got them. And I think it's interesting that the 2 short stories with very little detail are the first and the last stories in the chapter, and this TMI story, the really juicy one, is right here in the middle. Now, those of you who have done the Wednesday night Bible studies with me in our group that meets in the conference room on Wednesday nights, especially back when we were looking at the parables and the gospel stories, when they were often clumped together in 3s, you know where I'm thinking. You know where I'm going with this. If you've got 3 stories together, a couple of short ones on the inside and the outside, and a really juicy, creamy story in the middle, you know what I'm thinking. Are you with me? Y'all know what I call, those of you in my Wednesday night group, you know what I call these kind of groups of stories? They're Oreos. Because you've got a cookie on each side, and then you've got this really nice, sweet, cream-filled story right in the middle. So you know where I'm going with this. But here's the thing. When you think about a group of stories stuck together like this, you think about one of these Oreo settings where you've got 3 stories together, you've got to remember that when you go to the store, when you buy the Oreos, you buy the whole thing. They don't sell just the wafers, do they? No. They don't sell just the cream. No. When you buy a pack of Oreo cookies, you get whole cookies. Now, it's a holiday. Got to get y'all stirred up. Can I at least get an amen for Oreos? All right, here we go. So I want you to see what we've got here in this too much information story. I don't want you to get completely lost in the details of this story. I want you to see these 3 stories as a unit. These 3 stories are really a whole that are telling us one biblical idea. And to get that combined idea, to get that unified idea, you have to remember what we've learned so far in the book of Judges. Number 1, the Spirit spiritual strength of Israel was short-lived. After Joshua and his generation, Israel begins worshiping Canaanite gods. It's unbelievable, but they just jump from Jehovah to Baal. You see, our generation, we think everything is new to us. Our generation is not the first generation to be told, well, it really doesn't matter who you worship. We're just all trying to get to the same place. Well, it's bunk now and it was bunk then. But that's the lie that Israel believed. Oh, it doesn't matter if we worship Jehovah, if we're worshiping Baal. And the point is, we're going to church once in a while and we're trying to live good lives. Well, it does make a difference who you worship. That's why Joshua said at the end of the book of Joshua, before the book of Judges kicks in, he gathered Israel together. He said, now, I don't know what you people are going to do, but as for me and my house, we are going to worship the Lord. It made a difference to Joshua. It always does. Number two, we've seen that Judah, the largest, the strongest, the best of the tribes, had an opportunity to set an example for the rest of the tribes, but they failed miserably because they hesitated and they were afraid. They wouldn't go out to battle unless Simeon would go with them. And then when they started facing some really big odds, they pulled back and they said, oh, we can't do that. And the lesson we learned is that hesitation kills discipleship. When God says to you, this is what I want you to do, you're supposed to do it. And then the third lesson we learned, number three, is that right off the bat, right out of the gate, Israel begins to copy Canaanite methods. The Bible says in Judges chapter 1, when they captured the leader of the town of Bezek, they treated him just like the Canaanites treated their captives. Instead of doing what God had said, instead of living out godly methods, the Jews, just that quick, are assimilated into Canaanite culture, and they start thinking like the Canaanites. And in our day, you and I don't think that we can lose our spiritual identity that quickly. But let me tell you, the world will always be glad to help us become less and less Christian in our thinking and our activities. The world will always be glad to see us become more worldly in our actions and attitudes. You can mark it down. Judges is telling us that it's been happening for thousands of years. The world despises believers who have a distinctive identity and ethic. Count. So that's what we've seen. Short-term faith fueled by hesitation and assimilation. And it all adds up to a pretty bleak picture for God's people. And when we look at what we've seen so far in the book of Judges, we are left to ask the question, is this going to get any better? Is there any hope for God's people? Is there any chance that they're going to improve? Is there any chance that a church that gets off track can really experience revival? Can anything change when God's people get messed up? The answer from these three stories in Judges chapter 3 is yes. If. Yes, God's people can improve. Yes, God's church can experience revival. Yes, if any one person, any one believer will be willing to do what they should do regardless of whatever everyone else is doing. Now, do you hear what I'm saying? There is hope. There is a chance. There is the possibility of improvement. Faith can grow if just one person will do what they ought to do, regardless of whatever anyone else is doing or saying. When one person will stand up, God has an avenue, an open door to work in a situation. That's the lesson not common everyday names, but I hope you'll remember these three first judges in the book. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar. We didn't read the story of Othniel. We didn't read the story of Shamgar at the end. We read the story in the middle, the story of Ehud. And some of you right now are thinking, I'm going to recommend to my children. That's a good grandchild name. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, right? I see folks writing all over the building. That's not what you're writing, is it? I will be honest with you. I tell you, every time I hear the name Shamgar, I can't help it. I've been conditioned by television. I have been assimilated. I think about that ShamWow guy. And that's all I hear every time I see his name. Anybody else having that right now? Is that happening? Are you hearing a voice in your head going, ShamWow? Am I the only one? Okay, whatever. These three stories teach us to do what we know we ought to do. Whether anyone helps us, whether anyone joins us, whatever anyone thinks about us, or even whatever we think about our own qualifications or our own abilities. Here's what you ought to take away from these three stories. We're going to talk about it for just a minute. But what you should take away is that if God has led you to speak to somebody, to serve in some way, to invite somebody to church, or even to faith in Jesus Christ, or to take a position of leadership, then what you ought to do is step out and speak and serve and invite or lead. Whatever God has said, this is my path for you, then you ought to follow it. Don't hesitate, because hesitation is a spirit killer. Don't sit back thinking that you can't make a difference, that one person can't make a difference. That is the lie that the world tells that fuels complacency and mediocrity in God's people. And that's right in chapter 3. That's right where we find Israel. We find Israel in a place of complacency and mediocrity. I want to show you something. When you see this, I think it'll really leap out at you in the text. Look at verse 8. Look at verse 8. And we didn't read this verse. This is part of the first story, the story of Othniel. And verse 8 says that the children of Israel, even under oppression, were so complacent that they sat around under occupation and under oppression for 8 years before they cried out for a deliverer. Now, I know we like to whine. Amen? By the way, you know, University of Florida developed Gatorade. You know they've developed that Gator wine now? Yeah, it goes like this. We don't want to play LSU. Okay, I got one in for my team. We like to whine, don't we? Some of us make pretty good business at it, right? Oh, woe is me. Well, apparently the children of Israel were the world champions. Oh my goodness, they sat around for 8 years before they cried out to the Lord. I mean, how long does it take for the light bulb to come on, y'all? They finally realized, oh, we ought to pray about this. Oh my stars. And then look at verse 14. In the story of the oppression of Eglon and the Moabites, we're told that they sat around for 18 years before they asked God for a leader. How long are you going to let things go south in your life before you let God have His way? How long are you going to sit there? Let me tell you what the good news is. The good news is that God was not as complacent as Israel was. When God's people finally got on their knees and said, we need God to get involved in this, He sent deliverance. He sent it directly The only thing that happens in these three stories is that in all three stories, he sends deliverance in a way that's unexpected. Let's take a quick look at all three stories, and this won't take long. Look at the last story. It's one verse long, verse 31, the story of Shamgar. Here's what we know about Shamgar. We don't know a whole lot about what happened, what caused it, what the leading events were. We get one verse. Verse 31 tells us that Shamgar was a country boy from the farm. That's pretty much all we know. In the words of Waylon Jennings, singing the Dukes of Hazzard song, he was a good old boy. How do we know that? Because what does the verse say? When he went to battle, he used an ox goad. You know what an ox goad is? It's a sharpened stick. The boy was playing without a helmet. All he had, he's going up against Philistine soldiers, and he's going to war with a stick. But guess what? The Bible says God gave deliverance. He killed 600 Philistine soldiers because he didn't hesitate. One person willing to be available to God will have success, will be blessed, and it doesn't matter if they've got all the latest, fanciest tools. He went to war with an ox goad. Go to the first story. Look at verses 7 through 11. We didn't read this one either. It's another short story, not a lot of information, just that Othniel prevailed, and it says the Spirit of the Lord was on him. And he's got some things going for him. He's got a few advantages. He is the brother, we think, half-brother of Caleb, who is the famous give me this mountain guy from the book of Joshua. But he's also got some things not going his way. If you look, notice it says in the text that Othniel was the son of Kenaz. Kenaz was an Edomite, a descendant of Esau. So Othniel's not even a full Jew. In other words, he's socially undesirable. He's not a member of all the in-groups. He's an outcast. He doesn't fit in. But he is one man who follows God, and he ends up being the leader of the Israelites that defeat the Syrian army. The text doesn't tell us a whole lot about this, but at this particular time in history, the Syrian army is one of the strongest armies in the Middle East. And so you got a socially unacceptable outcast who says yes to God, and he wins. And then, oh boy, the story of Ehud. What a story. I mean, this is a story for modern times. Ehud has a concealed carry sword, yet bound on his right thigh. And why would it be bound on his right thigh? Because he's left-handed, and so they would have thought if he had a weapon, where would it be? On his kidneys. Checks it out. So we got concealed carry in this story. We got secret messages. We have ominous villains right out of a James Bond movie. We got Mission Impossible escapes. He locks the door, gets away before anybody knows. And of course, no one ever forgets about verse 22 where it says, and the guts came out. Too much information. Ehud is the James Bond, Ethan Hunt, and Jack Reacher of the Old Testament, all rolled into one. And beyond the crazy, gory details of the text, I mean, look what really stands out in this text. When you read the story, the one thing you cannot miss it, is Ehud's boldness. Not everybody Come on, Stephen, there you go. All right, now the bad news for y'all is in the Old Testament, in the Jewish mindset, people just didn't think left-handers would ever. In fact, let me show you this. Look at your Bible. Look at verse. Y'all will love this. This is fun. Look at verse 6. Where's it at? I lost it. I read it. Verse 15. But when the sons of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a left-handed man. Now that's what we're reading in the English text. The English text says he was a left-handed man. That's not how the Hebrew Bible reads. You know how it reads in Hebrew? The Hebrew says, and Ehud was no good with his right hand. That's how it reads. That's how the Hebrews thought about southpaws. It reads literally in the Hebrew that he was bound up in his right hand. In fact, every time you read the terminology left-handed, especially when it's applied to Benjamites in the book of Judges, that's the way the Hebrew reads. They were no good with their right hands. And so consequently, that's how people were thinking. What does Ehud do? He uses that to his advantage. So the guards see Ehud coming. The guards say, well, left-handed Ehud, he's not going to be any problem. Just check his left hand. He ain't got nothing. He gets past the guards, and he pulls out that homemade sword, and he gets the job done. This is what the Bible is trying to tell us, y'all. God is looking for people who are available, not necessarily able. Able versus available. God does not care if you are a country boy with a sharpened stick. God does not care if you are a socially unacceptable outcast. God does not care if you are an inconspicuous left-hander, as long as you will do what He has asked you to do. Here's the thing we miss all the time. God accomplishes much with obedient people. Or as one old-time preacher said it very well, God can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. I like that one. Now, here's the bottom line. If you look at verse 11, it says, Othniel did what God wanted him to do. He got it in here, and the land was undisturbed for 40 years. Ehud did what God wanted him to do, and verse 30 says the land was undisturbed for 80 years. God can get a straight leg with a crooked stick. Now, here's where it comes down to you and I. What is it that God is saying to you? What does the Lord have for you? Christianity is never unexpressed. So where's your place of service? And why are you holding back? What does God have for you to decide this morning about how you live, about how you talk, about your church membership, about your salvation, about how you will live for Him? What are you waiting for? It's time to say, yes, I will. Let's stand and pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity, even on this holiday weekend, to be gathered in your house. And it's good for us to be together, and it's good for us to be challenged.